Welcome to Mirza Movers, a series where we celebrate leaders, trailblazers, and change makers in the caregiving industry. By sharing their stories, we hope to shed light on the importance of caregiving and the kind of work that's being done to build a better world of care. I'm Saran, the CEO and co-founder of Mirza, and today we are thrilled to be joined by the incredible Eve Rodsky. Hi, Eve. Thank you for
Hi,
joining
Sarah.
us.
So good to see you.
Good to see you too. So, I would say Eve needs no introduction, but your story is so impactful. So, will you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us about your important role in the care space?
Well, thank you so much. And you'll probably hear lots of unpaid labor sort of going on behind me as there are children here in the house. So thank you for that frame. My story is interesting, probably similar to yours, or to I think probably a lot of listeners or the viewers of this, which is that I don't think any of us, expected to be in the care space. I mean, not as caregivers, maybe, but in terms of advocates, right? I mean, the idea of being an expert on the gendered division of labor, Saren, was never on my third grade, what do you want to be when you grow up board? And in fact, it wasn't even on my radar when I went to law school. I went through 4 years of college and never, ever even came across a gender studies class. And then in law school, everything I was doing was sort of in the economics discipline, where you're assuming a rational actor, and typically you're assuming a white man, I think, in those situations. And so I never, ever, ever thought I'd be in this place. And I really thought, as a Gen X woman, that the work of feminism and care had sort of been done in the 1970s, until everything that happened to me after my second son put that into question. Things that I was supposed to be smashing the glass ceilings of, maybe being president of the United States or a senator from New York, or even Mix City dancer. That was a dream of mine at one point. The only thing I could really tell you I was smashing 10 years later, after my second son was born, was like peas for my toddler, Zach, while I was breastfeeding a baby, Ben, trying to negotiate going back to work in a hostile work environment that said I wasn't going to have any direct reports and that there was no place for me to breastfeed. And then also having no childcare, no paid leave. So my husband went back to work because he's his own business owner about a week after both of our children were born. It behooves us to all want to care about care. But sometimes, research becomes me search. And for me, it was understanding that I was being failed by my workplace, by my own husband, who was assuming I was going to handle all the unpaid labor and childcare in our household, and then also not having any social support system or community.
It is, like you said, an all too familiar story. And I guess it segues really well, or maybe this is a question that need not be asked, but I'd love if you would share why care is important to you. And then if we take it on a positive note, what you envision for the future of care and the impact it can have on society.
I love that question. I just had this, felt inspired to grab my fair play cards. What this is a metaphor, Sarah, and as you know, for unpaid labor, there's 100 cards. You hold 60 cards with a roommate or a partner or a polyamorous relationship, whatever. If you don't have children, you add 40 cards if you bring children into the world. Of the metaphor, this is everything from, taking out the trash and all the way to being the tooth fairy for your child. The reason why I just brought these cards out was because you were asking me why care matters, right? Often we conflate care with time use surveys that have to do with childcare, housework, chores. I really truly believe that the crux of caregiving is literally our humanity. We may be talking about it as chores and housework, but the things we're talking about, what care really is, it's our humanity, it's our memories. And so I thought it'd be fun to illustrate how care matters. Again, these are just the 100 cards. I used them earlier for a presentation, and I want to just play with you. So I'm going to just shuffle and just tell me when to stop.
Okay, stop.
We stopped on this one. Meals. This is weekend meals. This is a card that's called weekend meals. Here we go. So what I want to know from you, Saren, and this is getting to why care matters. what do you remember about any meal that you've had on a weekend growing up? Was
Any
it like a drive-through because you're going to sports? Was it you all had to sit down? What was your family configuration? Who prepared the meals? Like, I'd love to just know. It doesn't have to be a long story, maybe 60 seconds or less, or 2 minutes or less. What do you remember about meals, weekend meals in your house growing up?
Well, every Saturday morning, my mom and I would go to McDonald's for breakfast. And it was a special treat because it was American food. We ate Chinese food and uh at home. And so it was a sort of at once culture and getting to understand America and how McDonald's is that, but also sort of a special time together each week.
Oh my God, I love that so much. And do you remember what you ordered or what your mom ordered? Do you have any
Yeah.
memories of what you like to order?
As a kid, my mom ordered the egg McMuffin each time, and I would always get the pancakes. I'm more of a salty person, but for some reason I just thought the pancakes are what kids eat. So I would always order the pancakes, have very little of it because it was too sweet, and then eat more of my mom's breakfast than she actually ate.
What I love about what we just did and say, I don't know, that was probably 45 seconds or less. I've known you now for a long time. I just learned some new things about you that, again, most of your meals were home cooked, that you had this unique experience with your mother on the weekends. It's a memory for you because you remember this Saturday morning at McDonald's. You can even remember what you ate. And I can't even remember what I ate like 2 hours ago. And why I bring that up is because most of our core memories, when I hear people telling stories of their childhood, revolves around one of these cards. And so there's not humanity, there's not life, there's not memory if it isn't for care. And so I think, again, people look at care as maybe a disabled relative or caring for, someone who has dementia or a baby. But your mother took care for many different ways. Many different things were coming through her head probably when she chose to do a McDonald's morning for you, right? What does it mean for my child to be an American, or to have somewhat of an American identity, in a Chinese household? What does it mean for me trying out, sort of this new cultural piece for both of us together? How are we going to navigate that together? These are what become our connections with each other. And so I think that's a long way to answer that question. But I hope everybody out there will do that with us. Well, you can go onto the Fair Play website, you can pick one of the 100 cards and just start telling your stories. Because what you'll start to see is that care is so much more than these assumptions about what it means, because you see care everywhere when you start to tell your stories.
That is so beautiful. And now I am trying to not cry because that is
Yeah, I feel that way too. And I want to get an egg McMuffin with you because I am like your mom. That would be my choice. And in fact, McDonald's is a very core memory for me and my kids now. For many people, maybe they would say, they try to guilt and shame me and say that that's not, the way to parent. But McDonald's is a very big part of our weekly routine, and a lot of it includes egg McMuffins as well.
I love how you describe it as a helping us, for me growing up, grappling with what it means to be American. So funny
Yeah,
representation for sure. And it shows care in that way. But also I think and for you and your family, it's ultimately for both our families, it's a core memory. It's this thing you get
absolutely.
to do together and it's special.
It is special. And so that's why sometimes there's such an essentialistic view of care, that it's a burden, right? That women do it because invisible work is the social safety net of America. And we never want to bother men with that care. Again, it's so essentialistic, and it also really ignores the power of this work and this invisible work, this labor, especially for men. Because part of the fair play movement was we called 50 schools for the book. This was, probably between 2014 and 2017. And I asked those schools, why do you just call women when a kid is sick? And it was interesting. It wasn't well, they were the first on the list because, most schools now have two parents, even if they're not in the same household. No, it was, well, women pick up. We don't want to bother men. And so by assuming that this is lesser work, right? That we don't bother men with a sick child, we sort of guard men's time as if it's diamonds. And we treat women's time as if it's sand, if it's infinite, we can find time. But by doing that and not bothering men with sort of the unpaid labor that is devalued in our society, we deprive, half of our population from experiencing what it feels like to hold a child's hand at the pediatrician's office. And so that's what care has meant to me, that an hour in the pediatrician's office is as valuable as an hour in the boardroom. And I do think that we can do that within a capitalist society, even a patriarchal society. But it takes some reframing.
And I think you're doing a lot of that work, and you have been doing a lot of that work. So can you share more about the initiatives and projects that you're currently working on to do that
Yes.
reframing?
Well, what's interesting, I think, about individual movements like Fair Play, which says that we want to help you redistribute work within your home. And I'll say this even same thing for Mirza. Sometimes there's not an understanding that there's a both and. I can and you can, and we all can be fighting for things like federal paid leave, universal childcare, but we also have to work within the confines of what we have now. So what I like to, my metaphor is that if I told you as an advocate, Sarah, to not breathe if the air is polluted, that would sort of be counterproductive. So what I like to say is, like, let's breathe polluted air. We can make the air better for everyone. And so while we're breathing polluted air, there's a lot of individual work that women can do as the oppressed in this, women and children, 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, to right the wrongs of the assumptions of invisible labor in their own homes and in their own community. So that's what fair play is. But we also have three other paradigms that we work on. We work on fair day. And fair day is understanding that parenting out loud, having flexibility, not requiring anybody to return to your ass in a seat 5 days a week, will be very conducive to the care community as a whole. So we have fair play, that's fair day. We have fair say, which is recognizing the Pew research that shows that most leaders, most wealthy people in America are white men with stay-at-home wives. They are the 1% in this country. And so with that as our leadership, there's not a lot of fair say in sort of what type of care is reflected in terms of empathy. If someone's doing everything off screen for you, you might not know that it's not great to start a meeting at 7:30 in the morning when people have to drop off for school. So we have fair play, fair day, that's fair say. And the last is fair pay. So the Fair Play Policy Institute is working on all of these issues, but we know, of course, that the motherhood penalty, this the assumption that we will all be mothers, even if we're not, is affecting women's career tracks. It allows people to pay us less, even for the same work. And so that's sort of how I look at what we're doing. That's our framework. And we're doing it through a policy institute that does research around who holds what cards. We're doing that with USC and UHG right now, which is United Health Group. And we're doing really wonderful work looking at who are leaders in this country. And of course, as I said, we're always working on issues of equity in terms of time and money.
Thank you for sharing. There's so much there that we can dig into that is really motivating. And I think our movement feels like we're often asking to be recognized and asking to be just let in the room, and our dignity and our value to be seen. So I would love if you could share a memorable success story or experience from the work you've done in this space.
Such a great question. I think pull off LinkedIn for this one. I mean, there's a lot of success stories, thank God, that we've had, but this one feels very personal. This is a younger millennial / older Gen Z lawyer in South Korea who wrote me. He's a man married to a woman, and he says, this is a thank you message from Korea. We got this on LinkedIn. I'm not going to say his name because I didn't get permission for that, but He says, I read your book, Fair Play Project. It is translated in 17 languages, including Korean, and write this message to express gratitude for you. I bought this book as one of husbands in the world, and I confess I thought I'm a fairly good husband, but I was wrong. That's not the point of the book, but I thought that was funny. I strongly believe everybody must read this book before they got married or have a baby. Personally, this is what matters. I lost my sister, who was a high court judge and a mother of two elementary student sons 4 years ago. It was because a cerebral hemorrhage stroke took her. I believe this disease exploded as she worked too hard and handled too much things during her father-in-law's death, which was just a week before her death. She took care of too many things as a full-time worker and a perfectionist judge. I think if this Fair Play project was spread over the whole of Korea and every husband executes this project, my sister would still be with us, having a balanced life with her smiling face, which I terribly miss. Thank you for writing this book, and I'll practice this method from now on. So how can you beat that, Siren?
How can you beat that? The many times that I think our conversations, plural, move me to tears. That is so powerful.
I still feel like crying from reading that, and I've read it like 30 times now. It's just, I think the stakes are so high. We think about these things in terms of policy, but when you really think about it in terms of like human suffering and isolation, it doesn't have to be this way. I think that's was the most exciting thing about your work and why I love partnering with you is that you also recognize that. Like, it does not have to be this way. It doesn't have to be that employers are on their own, that, childcare is taboo, that people have to feel like they're stressed and isolated by themselves. It really doesn't have to be that way. And most of the world, and in fact, most of time, humans have not lived in these sort of isolated suburban boxes where, as one of my favorite professors, Sylvia Frederici, says, who sort of started a wages for housework movement, she says part of that was by design, that when you put men with a lawn in a small box house, then on Sundays, instead of going and organizing for his union, he's mowing the lawn. Women, again, relegated to the home and not the communal nature of what housework used to be, have a harder time understanding that their lived experience is not unique and other people are having it as well. So I think that return to understanding that we have obligations for each other is so important. And that's why I love the work you do, because you are using your value systems to say there are obligations here that we have to each other. There are obligations here that employers have to their workers, and we're going to fight for those obligations. And it's helpful for all. It's not a zero-sum game. So thank you for your work too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this is a lovely note to wrap the deep dive section of our interview. So we're gonna use the remainder of time and move to our lightning round.
Ooh, I love it.
Lightning, you'll see based on the question.
Lightning light. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So some more so rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. Can you describe caregiving in 3 words?
Beauty, labor, worth.
I love that. That last one in particular, worth, is so powerful. What's your go-to fact or statistic about caregiving?
That women shoulder 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, regardless of whether they work outside the home. And we know it's a gender issue, not a money issue, because as women have more economic power, they do more unpaid labor.
That last part is always so staggering because it points to power dynamics as well.
Yes.
And when at the top you were talking about in our society and in patriarchal societies, there's some of that we can feel through the fact that when our earnings are higher, we're also now taking on more of the work at home because power.
Power.
Yeah.
Yes. And guilt and shame with that's sort of the byproducts of power.
So in this work, it's a lot of caring for others and promoting caregiving. What is the best way that you have to take care of yourself?
For me, I call it the happiness trio, and I hope everybody gets a little bit of the happiness trio. Adult friendships, true self-care, not commodified wellness, but where I have to buy something, but like taking a walk, on the beach, exercise, and then what I call unicorn space, which is the third point on the triangle, which is this idea that I deserve to be consistently interested in my own life. And that may change for what that means. Right now, of the triangle, that point is tarot and astrology. I'm sort of going back to my tarot reading, and I love sort of otherworldly pursuits.
I love that. So final question I have for you. If caregiving had an official anthem and you got to choose it, what song would you pick?
I think I would choose Umbrella by Rihanna because the most beautiful thing I learned about mental health and the journey that I've had to write 2 books around women's time is that really true mental health, Søren, isn't the pursuit of happiness. It's having an appropriate emotion at the appropriate time, yet having the ability and strength to weather it. So to me, it's the ability and strength to weather it. A lot of appropriate emotions around caregiving can feel like overwhelm and boredom and stress, and those are appropriate, and we usually have those emotions at the appropriate time. But do we have the ability to weather it? Being consistently interested in our own lives is our umbrella. I want to hand that umbrella to you too, and all of our fellow care advocates. And so maybe that's why I was thinking of that song.
I love that.
And actually,
Well,
my son just walked in. Ben, do you want to do one lightning round before I hang up? Sarah's going to do a lightning round question for you. This is my son. He comes to a lot of gender equity conferences with me.
hi, Ben.
Want to ask him one of the lightning round questions?
Yeah, let's do it. Ben, are you ready? If you could have any superpower to help you in your caregiving role, what would it be?
Whether
Probably
it-
lightning speed,
lightning speed,
so you can get done with it quicker.
like chores. You mean like laundry and dishes? But what about your other caregiving roles, like when you have to take care of your sister? Any superpower you'd want for her, like when you take
Maybe
care of
like
her?
super strength, so I can hold her up.
Super strength to hold her up. I love that. Bye, Ben.
Bye, Ben.
God.
Well, that is a lovely way to wrap our interview. So that is a great superpower, 2 great superpowers. So to wrap us up, Eve, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and your inspiration with us. Where can people find you?
Please come find us at fairplaylife.com and also fairplaypolicy.org. We have 2 different websites. We're going to migrate everything over to fairplaypolicy.org. But we have a lot of tools for people. So, and anybody who doesn't, want to buy anything, they don't have to. We want people to have access to all of our tools. And again, to understand that there is a community here that cares about them, that sees your unpaid labor and your invisible work and values it.
Thank you. So thanks again, Eve.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a wrap on this episode of Mirza Movers. Thanks, everyone.